The work of the Wichita Public Schools is to empower all students with 21st century skills and knowledge necessary for success by providing a coherent, rigorous, safe and nurturing, culturally responsive and inclusive learning community. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening.
We're ready for our first item.
Under Public Communications, no one is registered to speak. Operations, Board of Education interviews, BOE District 3 vacancy. At the regular Board of Education meeting on November 6, 2017, Board Member Barbara Fuller resigned her position on the Board of Education because she had moved out of the boundaries of USD 259. At that meeting, the board approved the publication of a legal notice in the Wichita Eagle regarding the vacancy. The board also approved an application and interview process. The legal notice was published on November 9th, and it provided interested persons until noon on November 30th to submit completed applications and letters of reference. An application form, BOE District 3 map, and other information was available on the BOE section of the district website from November 9th until noon on November 30th. Each qualified applicant submitted a complete application with 3 letters of reference, is a resident of BOE District 3, and is registered to vote. Tonight, the board will interview all qualified applicants, and the interview sequence is based on the order in which applications were received. This item provides an opportunity for the board to interview applicants and take other action regarding this process.
Okay, what we'll be doing is the 3 candidates, 2 of them will go to the library while we're interviewing the first one, and we'll ask the candidates to come down and sit at one of the 2 chairs here in front of us. And each one of the board members will then have a set of questions that they'll be asking, and we'll go in order and proceed. We'll start with Sondra Luke. Mike, or Dr. Willoughby will take you over, the other 2 over to the library and show you where that's at. First. Yes. Tell me what. Yeah, we probably ought to. Okay, we'll start the process with Joy. We'll ask our set of topic questions, and then the next round will be the individual questions as they prefer. Joy?
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, Ms. Luke, and I always appreciate when people take a moment and think about how important the school board is. We're each going to have a topic to ask some questions of you, and so I have a couple of questions for you on board relationships. So the Board of Education is made up of 7 individuals from across the city. We each bring different perspectives and experiences to the table. We also have different strengths and weaknesses. That, combined with the very public nature of this position and the stringent rules around open meetings, can make for interesting board relationships. My first question is this: can you tell us about a time you worked on a board or a team that faced great challenges? What was your role, and how did you work with others in that setting to pursue the common good of the whole?
Yes, I was on a political party one time, and we were going to move into a new building, and I wanted to stay into the old building, and then some of us wanted to move into the new building. And so we just kind of communicated and to figure out which would be the best. I wanted to stay because the building that we were in, the restroom was in the building, and it was, the landlord took care of all of the toiletries and the soap and all the stuff like that. And I wanted to stay there because we wouldn't have to use the money from the party to pay for all that stuff. Whereas the new building, you had to buy everything, and the parking was in the back, and it was down an alley, and it was kind of, to me, it was kind of scary at night. And the other building, it had a bigger parking lot, and it seemed safer, And I thought we would save money if we stayed in the old building, but we ended up moving in the new building, and that was fine. I was okay about
So
it.
how did you work with the other people when you were making that decision to work through that process? How did that go?
Well, I just listened to what they had to say, and even though I was outvoted, I mean, that was okay. I mean, you can't always have everything your way, and you have to listen to other people because their ideas are also good ideas. So that's the way we did it.
Okay, great. So if you think about being on the Board of Education for Wichita Public Schools, what difficulties can you foresee in creating good board relationships with others on this board?
What good relationships?
What difficulties could you foresee in creating good board relationships with other members of the board?
Difficulties. Well, if there was a difficult decision, I think that we should all respect each other's views and just try to iron it out or figure it out without upsetting each other. That's the way I would do it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time, and I'm going to cede to Ms. Arnold now.
Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you for being here. You heard the vision, which is, and I'm going to read this. I'll ask you to, I'll ask my question, and then I'll read this. I want to know what stands out to you from our vision statement, and it is read.
Okay, thank you.
The work of Wichita Public Schools is to empower all students with the 21st century skills and knowledge necessary for success by providing a coherent, rigorous, safe and nurturing, culturally responsive, and inclusive learning community. That statement is read at every board meeting, and I'd like to know, what does it mean or represent to you? What stands out?
21st century skills. I would say that would be the future for the children's education and for jobs for the future.
Okay. And as we go through there, you know, not just to stop there, is there anything else that stands out in that statement that you'd like to address?
Coherent would be logical and orderly education, and rigorous would be accurate standards that the board would work with, or the district works by. And then the safety, of course, is for the safety of the children and the staff. And nurturing would be a place where you can encourage growth to happen. And culturally responsive, I would say to suggest that we respect all different cultures. And inclusive would be to include don't leave anybody out, include everybody.
Well, that was such a long question. That's the only one that I will ask you, so thank you.
Uh-huh.
Mine is on the budget, and one of the things today, the budget is decided by the state and set by our FTE. And in the past several years, the Gannon case has been in the courts for fair funding. Wichita Schools has supported this action. Would you continue to support this action now and in the future?
Could you explain that to me?
Yes, the Gannon case is for fair and equitable funding of schools through the state. And the courts have found that the state is not in compliance with the legislation that's put forth to fund schools. And Wichita is part of a lawsuit against the state to make sure that they fund us fairly and equitably with all the other districts in the state.
Well, the people that you just were talking about at the beginning, they are not with the Wichita School District?
The Gannon?
Uh-huh.
Gannon is the name of the case. It's a family in Kansas City that started it 2006, I believe, and we've been working with it since.
But it hasn't been working though, right?
We're still fighting it, yes.
Well, then I would try to find some other kind of resources.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
something better.
Something better.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Lynn?
Good evening, Sondra.
Hi.
It was good to meet you earlier.
Nice to meet you.
How do you think the board should interact with various publics, various groups of interest groups? How do you see the board working with those groups? What's our responsibility?
I think we should work with all groups. Do you mean like races or religions or?
You know, parent groups, they might be interested in one topic, another one might be interested in something else. How do you interact with, I guess, what do you feel the board's responsibility is of interacting with those kinds of groups? What's our role?
I think your role would be to, with the interest groups, you said, it's probably your responsibility to work with the different interest groups. That's what I would do.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what groups.
Okay. Well, sometimes here at the table, sometimes in larger, outside community meetings, we end up with people on two different sides of an issue. How would you deal with that as a board member? One says A and the other says B. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, I would listen to what they have to say and then talk it over, as a group, so we could try to figure out what to do to resolve the situation.
Okay.
Because that's what the board's role would be, is to,
And the people you talk about would be with the board? Is that how you talk to each other about?
right.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Hey, thank you
Hi.
very much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate your taking your time to come and visit with us. so.
I like your shiny outfit.
Oh, thank you. I need all the brightness I can get.
Me too.
I like your necklace.
Thank you. I like sparkles.
You'd
I
fit
didn't
right
get
in our
anything.
schools. Okay, my question is about diversity. And obviously, we are in a large, urban, and very diverse district. Can you kind of explain to me some of the things that you might have done with different populations and different kinds of things with diversity?
Well, diversity is important. We have to respect everybody's cultures, everybody's races. My kids are biracial. My husband is white, so I believe that no matter what color we are, no matter what religion we are, we're all family. So that's the way I believe.
Okay, that's great. There are some stumbling blocks when we have great diversity, and there's also some great joys with having great diversity in our district. Just from your background, what would you see as the joys and the stumbling blocks because we have such wide and different kinds of diversities in our district?
Probably the setbacks would be every particular race would, the only thing I could think of is somebody might think that their race is better than the other person's, and their race should be able to do this, and this one should be able to do this, but it can't be like that. We're all equal,
Yeah,
so we would just have to work it out.
good. What would you do to help work that out?
Well, I would ask him, I said, what's your problem? You know, and what's your problem and what's your problem? And then I would say, well, can we do it maybe this way and do something this way and do something this way so we can all try to come together? I don't know what the problem would be, but
Well,
like you said, there's stumbling blocks in all different
right,
races and
Yeah.
religions, so.
yeah, race and religion and poverty and all kinds of things
Right.
that we have in our district, which, you know, we have to work with.
Mhm. Yeah,
Good, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
It's nice to see you.
nice to see you.
Hi, Mr. Luke. My
Hi.
name's Stan Reeser.
Hi, Stan.
I just went through this process myself, so.
Oh, okay.
I totally understand the nervousness that you're feeling, and you're doing great. My question is in the area of superintendent relations. How do you see, or have you had experience with being on a board of directors where you have one single employee like a superintendent? And how do you see the board superintendent? How do you expect it to work?
Well, the party that I was in, we had a chair. It was a political party, and we had a chair. And I was the treasurer, and so you have to respect in this case, it's the superintendent, so you have to respect the superintendent's role. And you would have to work together to try to, because everybody's going to have their own views and their own decisions. And the superintendent would also have to work with the school board to express the school board's views and try to carry them out for the best for the students, because that's why the school board is here. After all, everybody has the same goal, to do what's best for the students and the staff.
So you would like to see a very free flow of an ideas between the board and the superintendent, or you would like to be more on the initiative of the board on the superintendent, or would you rather be reactive to what the superintendent needs and wants?
I would be reactive to what the superintendent wants. That's the way I would be.
It was very nice meeting you. Thank you so much.
Nice meeting you too.
Okay, now we'll start back over again with Joy, and the questions are now unscripted, and it could be on any topic that may come up, so.
Okay,
This is kind of the random question round, and then we'll finish up.
okay.
Joy?
Thank you, Mr. Rhodey. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to apply for this position.
Well, I am a big fan of public education. I attended Southeast High School. My 3 kids attended Southeast High School. My grandkids go to Curtis. I have 2 grandkids, a boy and a girl that go to Curtis. My mom went to Emporia State. She's a teacher. She's not well right now, though. She's in a nursing home. And my father graduated from Southeast. And so I just feel like I'm such a creative person, and I believe in education. Education is important, and I just feel like I would be a good board member.
Okay. And if you were on the school board, from whom would you seek advice or input in weighing key decisions?
I would talk to the members of the school board. I mean, because we'd be like a family, and if there was something I didn't understand, I wouldn't really want to go to somebody outside because they're not here. I would rather talk to somebody that's here because they've been here, so they already know. They have the experience.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I have only one follow-up question for you, and I'm going to lead in with a little bit of conversation because not all of us know the ins and outs and appropriate steps that you would have to take as board members. There laws that govern how we interact, and so I wouldn't expect you to know that, but what I will ask you is from a perspective of learning, and that's so key. You have to be willing to learn. Are you open to that, to just learning? There are people that feel like I already know the answer, and then there are others that are open to try and learn. So just describe to me what your attitude would be about learning the process.
I think that you can't get enough of learning, even if you have lots of degrees, and there's always something that you can learn. It's like, I know how to make 16 different kinds of muffins, and I know how to make my own salsa, and I just did it by tasting. So there's not, you can always learn. You can never stop learning. So that's the way I feel about that.
So you would be open to the process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
My question is, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Watching TCM. I like Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, and I'm a movie star fan. So, and I make my own jewelry. I design my own clothes. So, I'm just a crafty person.
You may have to explain some of those people you were talking about to some of the folks in here, because I don't think I know what you're talking about. But I do.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
My question would be just, what are the things that frustrate you?
Racism. That really frustrates me.
Boy, we're really putting you on the spot, aren't we? What do you see as Wichita Public Schools' biggest challenge?
Brownback.
We laugh, but we're not arguing with you.
Well, mine's kind of a follow-up on that. If state funding is the problem, and you have limited resource, what is maybe the one big picture policy issue that you would like to try to influence if we choose you?
If funding is the problem and you don't have enough money.
If we have limited funding, and so we're gonna have to make choices between A and B, but is there a particular issue that you are extremely interested in? Or a big policy issue that you're interested in?
Well, the students' education, I wouldn't want to cut that, because that would be, I mean, that's our future, is the students.
So academics is your big, academic achievement is probably your biggest issue, maybe?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
I think so. That would be it, to
Thank you.
me.
All right, are there any other questions for Ms. Luke?
Unless she has some for us.
Do you have any questions for us?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, that's fine. We don't like answering questions. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. You can stay and watch the other two candidates and stay around to the end of the meeting if you'd like.
I think my granddaughter's got homework, so I think we'll go ahead and leave.
We
Okay,
understand.
It was nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Nice to meet you.
We'll take a few seconds here and while Dr. Willemy's getting the next candidate.
Well, she'll like working with Ben Rogers, that he's our movie star. I got on TV today. Yeah. That's pretty wild. I wasn't.
Good evening again. Good evening. Just to refresh your memory, we'll go through a set of set questions from every board member, and then we'll go through with a second round of questions that are just basically random.
Okay.
And then we'll, don't know how else to say that. And then we'll go from there. And we'll start with Joy again.
Hello, how are you tonight?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you for being here, and really, thank you for taking the time to apply for this position. It's so important when members of the community get involved and put their name in the hat. We've just gone through an election and another appointment, and it's a lot of work, and so we appreciate you for even taking the time. The topic I was assigned is board relationships. So, as you know, the Board of Education is made up of 7 individuals from across the city. We each bring different perspectives and experience to the table. We also have different strengths and weaknesses. That, combined with the very public nature of this position and the stringent rules around open meetings, can make for interesting board relationships. My first question is this: can you tell me about a time you worked on a board or on a team that faced a great challenge? What was your role? How did you work with others in that setting to pursue the common good of the whole?
I was 2 terms as state president of the League of Women Voters and worked with the board. And one of the things is as you make a point, that each board member brings a perspective as well as a talent. So it's not just their abilities, but also where they come from, what their experience is. And that's the thing, that's a valuable thing. The League is very, very conscious and aware about open records and open meetings laws. And we have been a part of the Sunshine Coalition, the one that has the newspapers and the television stations, that sort of thing. And so we really know that the public really needs to be kept informed. We also recognize that there are issues, and particularly personnel issues, that need to be kept behind closed doors for the privacy's sake. But as the League, in working with other members, we have the attitude that all of us make a difference by being together to make the difference. So I'm really big on teamwork. I have an experience as a teacher as well. And I put in my application, I don't know if I used to have that slogan in my classroom: it's better to discuss an issue without settling it than to settle an issue without discussing it. And, you know, that some things just need to be, there needs to be pieces and parts shared because each of us can contribute a piece.
So then as you've served in the League of Women Voters, can you talk about a time when you had an issue where people maybe were in conflict and how you worked through that and what your role in that was?
Okay. We just don't have conflicts.
Okay, well,
But I'm laughing because I taught at Metro, the alternative high school, for so long, and we had so few discipline issues. And I'm diverting a little from your question, but I remember the time that I had a boy pushing another kid down the hall on one of those rolly carts, like a movie cart. And I remember thinking to myself, I think this is a discipline issue, but I can't remember what to do, because it had been so long since I'd had a, quote, discipline issue, because it just wasn't. My theory is that when people can be heard and they want to be heard and then get to be understood, which didn't mean the same thing as agreeing. And so that, to me, the issue is that all factors and all points of view get to be heard and politely listened to. And another one of my little slogans was about being polite, that you don't have to agree, but you can disagree without being disagreeable. You can tell I had a lot of slogans today. There's another one. A man of quality is not threatened by a woman of equality.
I
I'm
like
sorry.
that one. That's a
I'm
great one.
sorry.
That's all right. My last question for you is when you think about if you were on the board and it's about to change again and have some more new members join, and Mr. Reeser's just recently joined us, what difficulties can you foresee in creating good board relationships with other members of the board?
What difficulty?
What things would make it difficult? How would you, or not?
I don't like it when people overshout each other, and I'm likely to defend one being shouted over and get louder, but I'll promise that I'll try not to do that, because we probably won't shout at each other. I
don't think
remember
there's
the
been
days
any.
of the 90s.
I was gonna say, I don't think there's been any shouting around here for quite a while. All right, well, thank you for your time. I'll ask you some more questions later, but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, again, I will echo that. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to ask you a question about the vision.
About what?
About the vision. I'm going to read that to you.
Oh, the
vision.
vision statement of the
right,
district, yes.
Yes, and as I read that aloud, I want you to think about what stands out to you in that statement. And at each of our board meetings, it is read by the president. The work of Wichita Public Schools is to empower all students with the 21st century skills and knowledge necessary for success by providing a coherent, rigorous, safe and nurturing, culturally responsive, and inclusive learning community. What stands out to you?
Well, it just jumps out about all students and inclusive learning community. My career has been in teaching government and history, both in the Wichita Public Schools and before coming here, and then for the last, since I retired from the Wichita Public Schools at Butler Community College. And I really do get on a soapbox about the fact that public education is the absolute foundation of democracy. That it is so vital, and you know, I understand we've got to teach math and we've got to teach English and reading and certainly be able to read the graphs that school boards and state legislators put together for us. But we have got to teach all students so they are educated citizens. Beyond that, of course, to be citizens that will contribute, that will have a successful life, which may or may not mean success in money. But I just get really fanatic about this all thing, that we don't just pick and choose. And one of the things that's such a tragedy is when we get states that, the state budget that gets cut and cut and cut and cut, we end up with bigger and bigger classrooms, and teachers are forced into a situation where it's a little bit like bowling. You roll the ball down the middle, and the kids on the side that don't quite get whatever knowledge is thrown at them, it's like, well, good luck. I just am a real fanatic about the all and the inclusive part. The other parts are very, very important, but all and inclusive just really. Public schools, it's just, and we've got to change that law that makes some tax money go to the private schools. Yes.
That's not in there, but I like that. Thank you.
Speaking of the budget is decided by the state, and for the past several years, the Gannon case has been in the courts for fair funding. Wichita School has supported this action, and would you continue to support this now and in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. The League of Women Voters was up in Topeka testifying numerous times. I was up there as a, giving testimony about the funding. And going back to the thing about the vital role of public schools and the vital role of adequate funding for public schools, adequate and equitable funding for public schools. Absolutely. I did some research since applying for this and just did the math about how much down our per pupil is since 2010. And I did not go ahead, but I need to find out what has been the cost of living since 2010. So not only are we down dollars, but we're down even further because of the cost of living. And it's just beyond my understanding how that there could be anybody that wouldn't think that the public schools, from the very beginning, I mean, really before 1776, the idea of education, you know, the famous quote by Thomas Jefferson, those people that think that they could be ignorant and free will be neither ignorant, no, forget that. But the point is, we've got to have education in order to have the freedom and the role of democracy that we need to have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, Ernestine. CPI's been up about 13% since then, so if my numbers are right, so.
Since 2010?
2010, so, but actually our high point was 2009, so I think 4,400 was the high, so, but I appreciate your comments. I think they're right on track.
Right.
My question has to do with community relationships, and you know, how do you think the board should interact with the various publics that we serve? You know, we have taxpayers, parents, students, and the whatnot. What's our role or responsibility in dealing with those groups?
Well, I went to the listening session at Meade. I just was really thrilled with that idea, about the idea of having a public meeting where people who are stakeholders or just observers, now, quite frankly, everybody's a stakeholder in public education, and those that don't know it still are stakeholders, whether they know it or not. I just thought that the idea of making a gesture to the community, come and tell us what you think. Mm-hmm. Come and ask us questions. I thought that was a wonderful idea, and I just really want to compliment you for thinking of that. And I got a lot out of that meeting, just coming and listening to the other citizens as they spoke. It gave an opportunity for teachers, for parents, and there were people there that had no children in school, and they weren't teachers, and so that was good.
Good. And then sometimes we have speakers here or elsewhere that have opposing views. How would you handle that as a board member?
You listen, and you don't shout over them. Right. Now, I don't think anybody on this board or the next board would do that, but quite honestly, sometimes somebody can speak and you can look and see by faces that people aren't listening. Mm-hmm. They may be speaking, but it's like, and that's the thing I really think this board has shown, and I think the people coming on are going to show, is you just listen to them. That doesn't mean you're going to have to agree with them, but give them the chance to tell you what they think and why.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening.
Need to turn this on or they'll be waving to me from above there. My question is about diversity. And obviously Wichita is a very diverse district. First, would you just kind of explain to me your kind of background in dealing with different kinds of diversity?
Now you're going to find out how old I am. I was involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s, mm-hmm. and was in the sit-ins, got thrown in a paddy wagon. But I went to Wichita Public Schools, Sunnyside, Roosevelt, East High, KU, and then I went to University of Minnesota and graduate of the University of Minnesota. I'd gotten married, and we went And when I graduated from the university, of the top 5 school districts in the United States, Wichita was one. And this was, I found out, at the University of Minnesota, so it wasn't like a bias of KU or WSU. The other top-notch school was the one I went to teach at, which was suburban Baltimore. And Baltimore County was very diverse. Baltimore City is very diverse. I remember a man saying to me, "Now, is that a mixed school where you teach?" And I said, "Yes, we have both boys and girls," and then just went away and left him standing there. But I really am so strongly in favor of the idea of diversity, but not just, gee, it's right, gee, it's fair, and gee, it's equal. It's like we learn something from the pieces and parts of each of the people and each of the groups. And we learn something from different age diversity. We learn something from ethnic diversity. We learn something from men and women, you know. And so to me, that it is a positive. It's not just something that we need to do in order to be fair, which of course we do, and not just because we believe in justice, which we do. But the whole idea of diversity has been kind of the beginning of, I was at KU when I first was like, oh my gosh, they've got segregated swimming pools. Mm-hmm. And I remembered that it had never crossed my mind, and that was like, we've got to change that. And so that's kind of, to me, the issue is that the fairness and the underlying equity is just a given. But the more important part is that what a richer experience our district has than some that are so much more homogeneous. We are so fortunate to have that kind of.
I agree with you. We are very fortunate.
Yes.
And we have diversity in, of course, race and ethnicity, and in cultures and in poverty and in all kinds of ways in our district that makes us stronger.
You know, special needs and
Absolutely.
traditional education for traditional kids, and we've got the metros, and we've got the different kinds of our pilot, I mean, not our, the schools, the magnets.
Magnets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. With that kind of thought in mind, of all that kind of diversity in our district, there are great positive things for that. And there are some hurdles that we have to jump. In your mind, what are two of the big positives, and what might be two of the hurdles that we have to overcome?
Well, the positives are that our children can learn from people that are not like themselves, and thereby that's something that our textbooks can't teach them, and that's something that our even our teachers can't teach them. It has to be just the experience of being in the community and the diverse population that they're in. So that's certainly a big positive. Another one of the positives, of course, is just the very fact that what is it? The rising water lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. The idea that indeed nobody is hurt by helping those that are struggling the most. Everybody gets helped if it has. The problems is, I think, again, it comes back to groups that feel like that they're not being heard, or groups that feel like that they didn't get a fair chance to explain or to tell what their complaint was or what their need was. And that'll be one of the biggest issues, I think, that this board, our superintendent, is going to be facing. And it's what happens in the classroom, too. The kid most likely to act up is the one that is going to feel like that he wasn't fairly treated. And he says, well, you know, and one of the things that I have done is that I have a consulting business where I go out and do in-service programs for other school districts on working with the reluctant learner. And you and I both know that reluctant learners are not just one kind. We don't have one at-risk kid. And in order to do this, I used to have little names so I had Arrogant Augie. And you'll recognize Arrogant Augie. He's upset because something's happened that he wasn't listened to, and he's got his feet out in the aisle, got his arms like this, with, I dare you to tell me anything because I'm not going to listen. You know, and then there's helpless Henry, who's, you know, no matter what you tell him to do, he can't quite figure it out, and so on and so forth. But I find that when kids and teachers and public parents feel like that you've really listened to them, they may not agree with what you decide, but they're much more likely to accept the decision. And that goes back to the thing over here, is that that's why we need to have such good rapport with the public, that they know what's happening and why we do it. And I think it's so hard. There's so much that the school board, you know, I don't need to tell you that you're the largest in Kansas, and the money is, how difficult it is to try to meet it's like being a juggler, to meet all the needs. It's hard. And so that's going to be one of the difficulties, is going to be, the first is helping people to feel like you've heard them, and the second is how do you do that adequately for every population that feels like they've got something a scratch that hasn't been itched? No, an itch that hasn't been scratched. I've got to cut this out, don't I?
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you again. My question is in the area of superintendent relations. What's your philosophy? How do you see the board and the superintendent, how they should interact among themselves?
Well, I was thinking about this because I obviously knew ahead of time this was going to come. It's almost like I see, you remember those things that cheerleaders do where they're stacked? I see it almost being upside down with the board at the bottom, and then the superintendent, and then in the sense that what the board is to support the superintendent. And the superintendent and the board are to support the staff, the teachers, and the students like this. And I will tell you that one of the best teaching experiences I ever had in my life was under Dr. Clarence Horn, that I understand is still doing recruiting for the district. That was the kind of person that I see as a model for us, and that's that he saw himself as the support for the teaching staff. I'll never forget the day that one of my colleagues was griping about a clock that hadn't kept time in his room. Gosh, I can't remember when, but he had never said anything. And one day he said around Dr. Horn, not to Dr. Horn, but said, that doggone clock, if I could get a clock that kept time, the next day, Clarence Horn had brought a clock to the classroom for this teacher. He heard, he acted. And to me, that is the issue, is that we are the policy persons. We, the board, would be the ones that support the superintendent, but we are there to, what's the word? What do they call it in the high schools? They have a whole suite that they call the support suite or something. And the whole idea, to me, that's what this is all about. This supports the superintendent, who supports the principals, who supports the teachers. Well, I've said that.
Do you see the relationship as 360, or do you see it as a board members should be showing initiative on issues, or do you think the board members should react to issues from the superintendent?
Oh my goodness, I hope that we're supposed to be showing initiative. I'm not sure I could sit and react
And just
only.
No, I appreciate your
Because
honesty.
I've already been doing research, and it's like, yeah, but I do see that, again, the same kind of thing. We can give ideas, but necessarily, we learn from her. We get the info. She can give us homework.
So
She
you
can
include-
send us.
So you include the 360 in that, with the emphasis on initiative with 360 support.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, now we'll go back to Joy, and any follow-up questions that we would have at this time.
All right, back down here. I have a couple of follow-up questions. The first one is, if you were on the board, if you were appointed to the board, what specific steps would you take as a school board member to improve transparency and make school district information more widely available?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that, because I don't know what I don't know. And so, but I just know that the public is happier and more accepting of decisions when they know what's going on, even if they disagree, if it can be as to how. I really, just going back to my meeting at Meade Middle School, where there was a public listening thing, I think that things like that, open hearings like that, where people can come and ask or pound their shoe on the table, has got to be the beginning of the transparency. I didn't feel any kind of person in that group that was negative. Even when we asked, the question was asked, what are some problems that you see with the school district? Everybody who responded it was like, oh, you want my idea? So to me, listening and being available has to be the beginning of the transparency.
I think that's a great answer. My next question for you is, if you were on the school board, from whom would you seek advice or input in weighing key decisions?
Other board members, for starters. I might go to Clarence Horn, no. But you have to do research and find out what other districts are doing. You have to gather information about good ideas that somebody else has thought of. But basically, you're going to be sharing information among each other. And like I was saying, just the whole thing about the diversity, as well as the diversity on the board, is that each has a piece that needs to be fit together as the whole. So advice, I'm sure I would go to the superintendent under numerous. I'd probably say, have you got a magazine article on that, a journal article? Have you got a book on that?
Okay, so that's a great answer. I'm going to push just a little bit harder. If you were on the board, so when you sit on a board with a group of people, only talking to that group of people is a good thing. I mean,
Say that again, I didn't.
Talking to that group of people is a good thing, but only talking to that group of people can lead to groupthink. And I think that's why Dr. Thompson really wanted to make sure we
Right.
had these listening sessions. So outside of the board and the superintendent, who would you seek input from? Maybe in your district.
Well, I would think that board members ought to be on a regular basis visiting schools. To me, you can't know about what's going on if you've never been into the schools. I'm saying that, and yet I confess to you that the idea, it's a little bit daunting to think about how many schools we have in this district, and it's like, oh my goodness, how do you have time? And yes, I am retired, but I'm also involved in other things. And so that would be one of the ways, is to be sure that you go out to the schools. I would ask teachers, I would ask principals, I would ask community members. I might even ask senators.
Don't do that.
Heaven. But, and let's face it, quite frankly, the hands of this board are tied most often by the funds that come or don't come out of Topeka. And so that one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that we get a good communication going between us and Topeka, the legislature. It doesn't do any good to make enemies of people that you're going to ask for to, to support your funding. And so the idea, the same thing about the respect that we have for one another is like I said, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And I'm a religious person. I confess that when I was ready to say totally no about applying for this, I said no, 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 1,000 times no when someone asked me to apply this. I sat down and thought about it, and immediately the verse out of Proverbs came about being the voice for those who cannot speak for themselves in Proverbs 31. The voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. So I definitely think that we need to get all the input we can, but we have to remember that we as a school board, it's those kids. It's the kids that don't get the vote in Topeka, that don't get the vote in the legislature, that don't get to make the budget in the governor's hand. We have to remember that that's the basic thing why we're here.
Well, thank you very much, and again, really thank you for applying, and I'll cede to Ms. Arnold.
And I have 2 follow-up questions. The first one, there are a number of different rules and policies and even laws that govern how we operate collectively and individually. And so my first question is, are you open to learning?
That was the main reason why that I pulled back when somebody said what I thought, good heavens, the amount of learning that you're going to have to do to be on this. Yes, this is indeed a learning thing. But I'm excited about the idea of learning and not learning. And I'll tell you true, I want to know what in the world is AVID? There's all these acronyms that I'm running across that I don't have a clue what they mean. So I've got so much learning to do.
I share your concern on that. That was one of the things that was very frightening to me is, will I learn all those acronyms?
Oh.
My second question has to do with the amount of time that it takes to be an effective board member. Some will have speculated that you're looking at maybe an additional 20 hours a week, and I guess it tends to vary dependent on what's going on. So would that be a problem for you?
Well, I'm on the board of the League of Women Voters here in Wichita. I've been, as I said, on the state board, and then I kind of thought I would kind of coast when I did on the local board, and you don't coast when you're in the League of Women Voters. But I've been membership chair that if I am chosen, I'm giving up that job. And I'm giving up a job at my church, because I really do think that when you take on a responsibility like this, it's a true commitment of the heart and of the law, that we are there to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. We're there for the kids. So yes, I would give up some of my, and I will give up rocking in the sun, reading my novel that I kind of thought was going to be in my life this year.
Well, thank you, and I do appreciate your candor on a number of topics. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're making it tough to for me to bring a follow-up question. You've answered so many of my questions throughout all the conversations we've had, and I appreciate that. I guess the one question to throw at you that you can, it's however you want to take it, what would be one thing you would change in Wichita Public Schools? If there is anything.
Well, I have to go back to what I was saying. there is so much I need to learn because I retired from the Wichita Public Schools in 2002. And in that period of time, the change has been very dramatic. I've just been thrilled over the years with the way that Wichita has been a model for alternative schools, magnet schools, special programs, and I need to go and look and see what those are, where they are now, and all of the kinds of things that have been added since I was in the public schools here. So I can't really tell you, without having some time to learn, what I don't know, because I don't even know what I don't know. Yeah.
I can appreciate that, and I understand that. Thank you very much.
First of all, I'd say don't quit reading because our kids need to see adults reading. So keep that going.
All
So,
right.
my question is, what frustrates you, and what do you do about it?
I just recently recognized in myself. I'm personally coaching a young couple that has 2 little babies that need to get a GED. And they don't know how to do long division even. So we haven't even moved on. And they will listen to me on the math part. But when they're going to have to pass the social studies part too, and when I start telling them something about the way the government works, that we've got 3 branches, and no, the president isn't the boss, and they dismiss what I'm saying as if I am biased, it just gets under my skin that I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher, an educator. And so one of the things that I have to be careful about is accepting that somebody else will not necessarily accept me or us as experts. How dare they have their own view and think that we don't know what we're talking about? It galls me, but it is the truth, and we have to let that be and find a way to work with them. So with this young couple, we've made a decision that somebody else will have to teach them the social studies part. I went to college to be a math major. It didn't take me very long to figure out that social science and public policy had no answers in the back of the book, like math did. And it was so much more fun to go into questions and problems where you didn't know the answer. So I'll leave some things to other people, and I'll take those that I can do.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's been a joy. Thank you very much for coming, and we really appreciate your taking your time to visit with us. My question is, what do you see as Wichita Public Schools' biggest challenge?
I think probably the same thing that you all have always been working on for a long time, and that's how do we keep from having so many drop out? This young couple that I'm working with, they were both dropouts, and they've got 2 little babies, can't get anything but minimum wage jobs. Our society doesn't have minimum wage jobs very much anymore. I see the future as not being at all open or welcoming for anybody that isn't educated. And I really see this almost as a crisis in America, but certainly for the public schools, is how do we get the kids to know that they need to stay and be educated? How do we get it through to them? How do we make them care? Again, one of the things that working with young, when I've worked with the young people, even at the college level where I've done college classes and teachers too, is that understanding why they need to know something goes an awful long way to having kids hang in. The second thing that goes an awful long way is relationships. if they can trust that teacher, if they can trust and have confidence in that educator, in that principal, they may not like whatever the subject is, but they'll say, okay, I'll do it for you. And I just see the future as being just, if we can't get them educated, it's a crisis. It really is.
Our world's changing very, very rapidly.
Yeah, exactly. And I looked at the scores. I saw today, yesterday as I was looking, I saw where our scores are in comparison, and I saw our dropout rate. And I, of course, have worked with dropouts, pushouts, and fallouts. And it's like, kids, there once was a Cessna or a Boeing where you could go work without a high school diploma. That job isn't there anymore, and they just got to say, well, my uncle did, you know. And so that's the biggest thing that I see as a crisis facing us all.
Very good. Thank you.
And my last question is, we choose you, you'll have about a year and a half. And at that year and a half, what would you say would be the biggest policy issue or area that you would like to say you made a difference in? You mentioned dropout rates. Is that the big one for you, or is it?
Well, it certainly is, but state funding. See, one of the things about being at the state level in the League of Women Voters is that we learned how to read those macro budgets and learned how to see where they were pulling this out and this out and this out. I just think we can't do anything unless we can hit the ground running with enough money.
So as a follow-up on that, if state funding continues to be tight, and you have to make priorities on what will be your big policy issues that you would like to work on, what would be 1 and 2?
I want to say, we're not going to cut anything. And I'm sure
And I think we all would say that.
I think that's how you all feel too. I don't know, but quite honestly, meeting the needs of as many kids, like I was using that analogy before, is that it just breaks my heart that we have bigger and bigger classrooms where we have to, like that, roll the ball down the middle, and if the kid over here falls off the edge and this one falls off the edge, it's like, oh, well. Whether it's gifted or whether it's kids with some kind of a learning problem, you know, there was kind of an attitude that, well, the gifted can educate themselves, or the slow one, well, you know, I don't have time to keep up with that. We've got to somehow or another be able to reach all the kids.
So you're very concerned about the kids that are on the margins.
I am, but I'm also concerned about, like I said, the gifted and the all.
Oh, that's okay. You don't
Yeah.
have to apologize for saying you, because I think that's what state funding does. I mean,
Yes.
what happens is if you cut state funding, the kids who have a lot of support at home are going to be fine.
That's right.
They're going to make it through. It's the kids on the margin that we lose. So
Well, I will tell you this.
I'm not trying to
you're
tell you
right.
how to answer, but
No.
that's.
At Metro Boulevard, we had the highest number of unidentified gifted and gifted of any of the schools in the city, because kids had been left out and their needs hadn't been met in the public schools. And quite honestly, those very bright kids had very bright ideas as to how to get in trouble. And so when they understood it within the first 5 minutes, they had 25 or 45 minutes to. And so we've got to meet all the kids and got to be able to let them know that we care. So yeah, and I do care about dropout rate. I do care a lot about dropout rate, yeah. So I suppose so.
All right, are there any other questions that we have for her tonight? Hang on, one question at a time. Do you have any questions for us?
I just want to tell you, I just admire you so much that you have done this, and some of you have hung in for years and years. And I really, it just really is a tough, and it's not just a slogan for me that democracy really does rest on an educated populace. And you guys do this for nothing. And the county commission gets $80,000 a year per person. So I don't have any questions, but I do want to just tell you that I really admire a school board. And especially those of you who don't have dreams of higher office.
I didn't.
No, I just am teasing, but the point is that it really is a labor of love, and it is something that I don't think the public appreciates quite what you all do, so. Now that I'm buttered you up, so I'll be finished.
Thank you for your time, we appreciate it. If you'd like, you can stay and
Okay,
listen, and we'll get the last candidate in here and keep moving. And again, thank you very much for applying.
thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
Did you get all the books read? Sorry to keep you so long in there.
Oh, that's all right.
All right, we're going to get started. Again, what we will do is each of us will ask you a question that has been asked of each candidate before, and then we'll have a second round where there are follow-up questions that we'll ask you, and they can be random. And we'll start over at this side again with Joy.
Mr. Rohde, I want to get banished to the library for an hour and a half sometime because that is my favorite place in the world. I am looking forward to some more library time soon. So I'm envying you a little bit. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for taking the time to apply and think seriously about this position because it is an important position in our community. Each of us has a topic, and my topic is on board relationships, our relationships with each other. So, as you probably know, the Board of Education is made up of 7 individuals from across the city. We each bring different perspectives and experiences to the table. We also have different strengths and weaknesses. That, combined with the very public nature of this position and the stringent rules around open meetings, can make for interesting board relationships. My first question is this: can you tell us about a time you worked on a board or on a team that faced a great challenge? What was your role in the challenge, and how did you work with others in that setting to pursue the common good of the whole group?
Well, I have sat on boards before, but I'm going to say the biggest group challenge that I've ever had is advocating for my children in special needs and going through the IEP process and not always agreeing on what is the most important thing to focus on. I did have a very steep battle with my children's administrators at their school based on, they took my son's laptop away. He's autistic, he's dyslexic, and he's dysgraphic, so he can't read or write. They took my son's laptop away, and he was needing 90% of the para's time in his classrooms because he can't read or write. So it took me many IEP meetings, many meetings with administrators, mediation, but I finally was able to get to the point with them where he has his laptop back now. And it was a very difficult process. The most difficult thing was to take emotions out of the situations and to come and be prepared to suggest solutions and not just complain about problems. So anytime you're working in a group and there's a disagreement, you know, if you're emotionally invested, it can be extremely difficult to remove yourself from that and to just concentrate on solutions.
Well, and I applaud you for that, because I personally think that as a parent, it's really hard to remove your emotions when you're talking about your child, and I'm not sure any of us would expect a parent to do that, but I know that sometimes in IEP situations, that is kind of necessary when you're trying to advocate, so I applaud you with that. So as you think about if you were on the board, what difficulties could you foresee in creating good board relationships with other people on the board?
I think most difficulties come when people don't come with an open mind and open to other people's points of views. Of course, I'm always right, because I'm always right, but that's simply not the case. I think we have to learn to trust each other and to understand that we're all here to talk and strategize in good faith, and we all have to trust that with each other.
How would you go about building that trust?
Leading by example, always listening, always responding, always being respectful, courteous. And you know what? If you tell me something I don't know before, I'm going to go home and research that. And I'm going to come back next time and be knowledgeable about that. I'm not going to brush anybody off because I think I know better. I'm going to value your input and value your own expertise.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I'll send it over to Ms. Arnold.
Thank you. And welcome, and good evening. My question is on the mission statement, and that's something that the board officer reads at each meeting. So I'm going to ask you what stands out to you, and I'm going to read that statement, which will give you an opportunity to reflect a little bit on what stands out. The work of the Wichita Public Schools is to empower all students with the 21st century skills and knowledge necessary for success by providing a coherent, rigorous, safe and nurturing, culturally responsive, and inclusive learning community. If you could just tell me what stands out, and it can be all of you. It's up to you.
Well, the first thing that stands out is the 21st century skills and knowledge. I think the jobs and landscape of jobs are changing across the country, and we're going to have to, you know, work with more internships and business relationships to try to get people prepared for those types of jobs. Of course, I spoke about technology. My son, who can't read or write, he will take 90% of a para's time to do two-page project, research this, research that. With a laptop, he highlights the words, it reads them to him, he watches a National Geographic video, he types in the text, spells checks, emails it to the teacher, 30 minutes, done. So I think we definitely have to look at what 21st century skills are going to be, because they're definitely changing. I personally like web-based technology because it's more adaptable and you don't have things that go, you know, that are outdated after you buy them. Safety is a huge issue. You know, there's bullying, there's issues with that. There's safety for teachers is an issue to me. I had an experience with a para last year. My son threatened to punch him because he tapped her on the shoulder. Well, it turns out that this para had been attacked by another special education student earlier in the year. So I would want to ensure safety for teachers and paras, and what are we doing when a situation like that happens? And then inclusive. We have a very diverse community here, both, you know, socioeconomic and, you know, just very diverse. And I think we need to make sure we're being inclusive of all students. And I think that that means concentrating on equity. I think that we need to put more resources where more resources are needed. People come from varying backgrounds, and they may need a little bit, you know. A kid may need a organization like Communities in Schools to look at and say, hey, does he need an alarm clock? Why is he not getting to school? So there's lots of different factors that we talk about when we talk about inclusivity, but basically making sure it's equitable all across the board.
Thank you for that.
My question is on the budget. And the budget is decided by the state, and for the past several years, the Gannon case has been in the courts for fair funding. Wichita Schools has supported this action. Would you continue to support this now and in the future?
Absolutely. I would definitely support it. I really, I believe in equitable funding of schools, bar none. And while I don't know a whole lot about the rest of the budget, I would definitely support that. Yeah, I'm behind that 100%.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, Rhonda. How do you think the board should interact with various publics? What's our role and responsibility?
So I think you need to involve the community. I think you need to be listening to teachers. You need to be listening to staff, not just teachers. You need to be holding community forums. By the way, I love all the listening sessions that are going on right now. I think that's exactly what we need to do. You need to be talking with businesses and trying to get partnerships. You need to be taking advantage of organizations that offer help to parents, like Families Together and things like that. All of that helps build education, and it's really the foundation. And once you get community involved, you have buy-in, And I think that helps with creating longevity of policy because, board members, there's turnover, superintendents, there's turnover, but when you get buy-in from the community on policy, then that creates longevity. They're going to stand behind that for a longer period.
And then my follow-up question is, sometimes we have speakers with opposing views. How would you handle that?
Just ask that it be respectful. I mean, opposing views are always welcome. Any view is always welcome, but we need to have a respectful dialogue.
Okay, great, thank you.
You referred to diversity earlier, and my question is on diversity. And obviously, Wichita is a very large district and a very diverse district in many, many kinds of ways. Give us a little bit about yourself and your history in dealing with different kinds of diversity.
Well, I work for candidates right now, so I have to work with everybody, and I do. And then IEP meetings, they're always very diverse. I grew up in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and, most of my friends, they were all diverse, very diverse. I'm on the board of the Peace and Social Justice Center, and we are always doing things in diverse communities, voter registration drives and things like that. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. In reference to the school district, our diversity, it creates great joys. And we celebrate it. Our statement is the world walks in our hallways, which is absolutely true. But could you give me a couple of the joys that diversity brings for us? And then also a couple of the hurdles that it might bring?
Absolutely. Studies have shown that students that are in diverse districts have stronger outcomes. And being in diverse situations can foster empathy in students, and then it prepares students for work life, where you're going to be in a very diverse environment, and you've got to know how to act. You've got to be sensitive to different cultural norms and things of that nature. So it really does prepare students, and it really does make them more accepting in general and less judgmental, I believe. Challenges to that are going to be, I know there's been a huge increase in English as a second language. I think about double in the last 10 years. So keeping programs like those going and funded. I know there's been an increase of refugees here. I think we have 119 different countries represented in the school district. And so challenges are going to come with that, with trauma and other things like that. So it's really about being sensitive to the various needs of diverse populaces and being able to address those adequately and make sure that we're always staying ahead on that and not getting caught behind.
Great. Thank you very much.
Ms. Cox, my area of question is in the area of superintendent relations. Basically, what is your general philosophy on how you feel board members and individual board members should react with the superintendent? And what's our roles? What's her role? What's our roles?
Okay, so as far as specifically interacting with the superintendent, I think the most important thing that school board members can do is be supportive. Studies have shown that in districts where school board members are supportive of their superintendent, they get better results. And they get better community buy-in. So, I mean, specifically when we're talking about interacting with the superintendent, you know, we need to create a shared vision, make sure we're all on the same page, make sure we're planning strategically to implement that, and then let the superintendent do the administration and handle their job and not micromanage.
Do you see the creative vision development, do you see that as a 360 process or a board initiative process or a board reaction process?
The vision,
To create you use the word, work
Right.
together to create a vision.
well, to be honest,
How
I've
do
read
we-
a
how do
lot
we
about
create
it, and it varies by school board. I don't know how you guys specifically do it. I just know that it's very,
What would you personally prefer? What type of
I would
strategy
personally
would you-
prefer the school board, you know, to sit down and create kind of an outline, and then the superintendent to come in and have feedback, and I would prefer them to work together. I don't think either one's got the right answer. I think it takes superintendent and school board.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll start with the second round of questioning, and we'll start with Joy again.
Great, all right, you've gone through once. So first question for you is, why did you decide to apply for this position? What is it about being on the board that appealed to you, and why are you here today?
Well, I mean, there is, of course, the fact that I have 4 children that go to USD 259 schools. I see what's happening with the school funding, you know, and I'm here to make sure that this entire community gets the best education for their tax dollar. I'm very passionate about education, and I want to be an advocate for students and staff, and I want to make sure that everything is working together in cohesion, and that we have a good vision that will support students' achievement going forward.
Okay, so a couple of hypotheticals. If you were on this board, what specific steps would you take as a school board member to improve transparency and make school district information more widely available?
Okay, so I would like to improve transparency. One specific example is when I was having the issue with the laptop, I tried to get the school board's policy on assistive technology assessments. And they're not legally, or USD 259's policy on, they're not legally obligated to give it to me, so I couldn't get it. And so there was no way for me to actually tell if the process was being done correctly. I think for parents, it's extremely important to have transparency in all those processes. There should be no reason you shouldn't be able to look up what is the steps, what should they be doing next. So, and I also think as far as getting community buy-in, transparency is extremely important as far as those processes. You know, I said I don't know a lot about the budget, and I don't. I've read through it a whole bunch of times. But you know, I did like, in the beginning of the budget, everything that I identified that I was like, well, what's going on with that? I went back and looked, and it said, well, resources were reallocated. Well, I would like to know more about that. I would like a little bit more transparency about why they were reallocated, what were they reallocated to, and things like that. I understand that there's basically money that shuffles. It's kind of a contingency fund. You never know if the building's going to get damaged and you need money. But I think we could be a little bit more transparent about that, you know. And then also any process relating to children should be public. A parent should be able to know if a process is not being followed.
Okay. And then next question. When you're a school board member, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. From whom would you seek advice or input when it was your turn to make those decisions?
That would depend on what the decision was. Of course, first and foremost, I'm going to seek it from my fellow school board members. but it depends on what the issue is. I mean, there's experts in different fields, people who have different experiences. I believe that you always go back to I don't know everything, you know, I always have to go back to the people who have been through that and who know that and have insight.
So who might some of those people be?
Lynn Rogers,
Okay.
Burnett Chance, Marge, Marianne. There's a lot of different people. It depends on what the situation is. So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fair. Well, thank you again for your time, Ms. Arnold.
Thank you. Okay, there are two follow-up questions I have for you. And the first one has to do with board policies and guidelines and rules, and oftentimes legislation that govern how we interact with each other and as far as carrying on the business of the school district. How open are you to learning and accepting whatever the processes might be?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% open to that. I can learn anything. I was a little terrified about applying, but I have no doubt that I have the dedication and drive, and I can learn it, and I'd be happy to.
And I congratulate you on all of the different hats that you are managing to wear. But the one question that I will have in regards to that, being on the board, that it does require quite a bit of time. It is a big time commitment. Oftentimes you'll hear people average an additional 20 hours a week. It could be more or less depending on where you are. Would that be a problem for you?
That would not be a problem, and actually before I ever even thought about applying, that is one thing I checked into first, was to make sure that I could handle the time constraints. I have freed myself up from something, so I'm ready, and I know what the time constraints are, and I'm ready to commit to that.
Okay, thank you so much.
You've talked about some personal issues that you've had with the district. If you get to be on the board, would you be able to set those aside and make your decisions based on the information you were presented, or would you bring I don't want to say a bias, but a one-sidedness to the issue?
No, absolutely, I would set those aside, 100%. So I briefly touched on the issue where a para had threatened my son, right? So this is how I operate. I did not get mad. I went back, I did my research, found out that the para had been assaulted, and went to school administration and said, what are you doing for that para? I did not get emotional, and I did not raise heck or anything like that. That's how I operate. I can take emotion out of a situation and make sure that I am doing what is logical and right and not what I feel just reactionary. So I would absolutely separate any of that. And if there was ever something that I felt like I couldn't, I would recuse myself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Rhonda, my question is, what frustrates you? And what do you do about it?
There's lots of things that frustrate me. I apply for school board. No. When something frustrates me, you know what? I try to learn the most I can about it, and I try to figure out if there's something I can do. I'm not a complainer. I don't just complain. I look for solutions. And if I can't have a solution, I'm going to go to whoever I think can help obtain that, and I'm going to talk to them. So there are lots and lots of things that frustrate me. That's a very, very long list. We're not going to do that. But the point is what you do with your frustration, and if you make it productive. I mean, it's a whole big waste of energy to get frustrated about something and not actually produce anything out of it. So,
Okay, good, thank you.
My question is, what do you see as the Wichita Public Schools' biggest challenge?
I mean, of course, there's the budget, but I mean, you can only work with what you're given. So, one of the big challenges now, I would think, is on diversity. I mean, we are now not busing for, we quit that. So I think we need to make sure that we are staying on top of diversity and encouraging creative ways to make sure that our kids still get exposed to diverse cross-cultural environments. I think that's very important. You know, I think we took a great step forward when, what was it called? Hold on. As far as teacher morale, I think the listening sessions are great. I don't think it's all just about money. I think, you know, when we did the catch-up step and allowed some of that equalization, and so that way teachers aren't angry at each other as well. I think teacher morale is a huge issue, but I think we're working on that in all of the right ways. So, you know, special education, of course, and then I would say safety. With the increase in violence of students, I think it's important that we address that in proactive ways. I know that in the budget it said that you guys had plans for extra staff and things like that, and I'm really hoping some of that's going to go to those schools where they need it most and where, you know, I mean, kids with the right supports will do the right things usually. So.
Thank
And
you.
mine, I'm sorry.
No, I'm
sorry, I
done.
just assumed you were done.
I am. I just said thank you.
I can't believe I did that. Mine ties in with what she's talking about. If money continues to stay tight from the state and you have to make choices and priorities, what would you say your 1 and 2 big issue policies would be?
You know, I think it's more about finding creative solutions. So, like, there's a shortage of paras, right? But if you implement certain technologies, you can help combat that. That can take burden off of the paras in the classroom, which can then have a better effect on students in the classroom, you know, and teacher morale. So I don't think it's about prioritizing one thing or another. I think it's about finding solutions that can help in multiple different facets and getting the most for what you're supporting. I don't think there's one or two things that you can say this is the end all be all. I just think that we have to be creative about finding solutions and supporting things that support implementation in multiple areas. So get the most bang for your buck.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
All right, are there any other questions for Ms. Cox? Do you have any questions for us?
I do not.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank all the applicants for the District 3 vacancy. We will be voting on this Monday night at the end of the meeting, and we'll be going through that. So if there's any, you know, we'll ask for public comments through the website or, you know, via phone during the rest of the time until Monday. If there's any feedback, we'd like to get that. So we'll leave that up to the folks. Lynn?
I guess I would like to say something. I think I did that last time after we interviewed. And the point I want to make, several. One is it is going to be very difficult to fill Barb's shoes. As you all know, Barb was here for 10 years and many years before that. What I thought was interesting was that when I got here tonight, I saw all 3 candidates visiting with each other and trying to find out about each other, and I was really encouraged by that in terms of how well they were looking and working together, you know, right away. I know 2 of the 3 candidates, but I know people that have written letters of recommendation for all 3 candidates, and they're people that I highly respect. And I do think it's going to be a very difficult decision. I do also want to say that I will be conferring with Ron Rosales, the individual that will be filling my shoes, because I want to get his feedback on how the new board can be fit together. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at each candidate in terms of what strengths and weaknesses they have, what they can bring to the table, and how they can fit together. And I'm sure all of us will be doing that and thinking about that over the weekend. It will be an important position to fill, but what I was glad to see was that all 3 have some real unique strengths and some real interesting aspects that they can bring to the table, each a little bit different. And so, so I just wanted to, again, thank all three for coming and interviewing, putting your name out on the list and getting the paper and all this kind of stuff. I know that's not easy, but again, I appreciate all three of you doing that. So thank you very much.
All right. As we would conclude today's candidate interviews, I'd like to read a statement. BOE District 3 candidates were confirmed at noon last Thursday. Through the course of this learning about each candidate and in the conversation with a family member, Dr. Thompson learned that candidate Sondra Luke might be a distant relative. Dr. Thompson does not know Miss Luke, but she did confirm that her great-grandfather and Miss Luke's great-grandfather were cousins. Dr. Thompson reported this fact to District Legal Counsel and sought guidance on how to properly disclose the information. Legal counsel recommended she share the information with BOE officers, which she did immediately. What I learned in my investigation is that there is no Kansas statute or district policy that would prevent Ms. Luke from serving in this position. Based on this fact, she is here today to participate in the BOE candidate interviews, and we welcome her. I believe strongly that a statement of this nature is important. In the spirit of full disclosure, Ms. Luke agreed. Seeing as we concluded the candidate interviews, I want to thank you all for coming this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday at the Board of Education meeting that begins at 6 p.m. Mike, next item.
Adjournment.
So moved.
I have a motion by Betty and a second by Joy. Old habits die. To adjourn. Looks like we can go home. Thank you very much.